So in this video on code.org, they talk about encryption and decryption, and they use the example of Julius Caesar's Caesar cipher. So Julius Caesar was a Roman general who later became a ruler of Rome, and he would send messages where you would shift the letters up by a certain amount. The number that you move each letter is called the key. So in this case, if we're going to set the key as 5, hello becomes MJQQT, because you're just moving each letter 5 steps down the alphabet. Now the problem with the Caesar cipher is that it's fairly easy to break. There's only 26 letters in the alphabet, so you only need to take 26 attempts to break it. Now what we can do instead is we can use much more complicated systems these days. So we have keys that are really, really big, and that makes it much more difficult to break, so that you can use a long number like this and change each number. I'll let you watch this video later, but they talk about 256-bit keys, which is that they have 256 bits worth of things. It's a huge number of keys, very hard for computers to break, but supercomputers can break keys. 256-bit encryption, which we'll talk about later. Okay, so she's then talking about increases in computing power. I'll leave that for you guys. You guys have that link, so you guys can watch that whole video later if you'd like. Okay, so just to play around with a Caesar cipher, so I will open this one here. So in plain text, it said, if you had anything confidential to say, he wrote it in a cipher. That is, by changing the order of the letters of the alphabet, and that made that not a word could be made out. I believe that text might be actually from a lot of people who learn Latin. They learn using the diaries that Julius Caesar wrote. Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, so Julius Caesar, he wrote diaries, and a lot of people use that when they learn Latin. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to shift that using the key of 7. So A becomes H, which we see there. So if I just want to change it to hello Lily, it becomes, with a key of 7, it becomes olives. Or if I change it to a key of 8, or I could change it to a key of 18, it becomes that. A becomes S. Okay, which is odd because I wouldn't think that 18. Anyway, what do I know? Okay, so I'm going to close that now and go back to my notes. Okay, so now we're going to look at key exchanges. So now we understand the concept of keys. So we're going to use sort of a representation of keys as a way that, okay, I'm not really, so I can see a couple of people having problem with audio. What I'm doing is I'm actually recording my screen at the same time. So what I can maybe do is I'll put the video up when I'm finished. That's probably the best solution I have at the moment. Is it still dark now? Let me, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reload it again. I'm going to close it and reload it. Okay, hopefully that helps. Okay, so you guys do know that you have to click the general. Yeah, okay, so for Charlotte's, okay, all stuff that I'm going to have to probably edit out later. Okay, so if it's not working at this point, I'll have to say that I will try and put a video up later. Thank you, Lauren, for that help. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, we're going to do key exchanges. Okay, this is the activity that we would have done in class, which is way more interesting when you see it done, in person, but we're going to watch it here. So what they're going to do is they're going to exchange a key. Now, we just saw in the Caesar cipher that the key was 5 or 18 or whatever the key was, and that's what we're going to shift all our information by. And these days we use 256-bit keys. But for us, what we're going to do is we're looking at this key is not being an actual number. We're going to look at it as being represented by padlocks, so that the encryption and decryption will be represented by keys and locks. Now I'm just going to speed this up. So the blue key is the key that both people want to use. They're going to encode all of their messages and decode all of their messages with this blue key. The problem is that one person has the key, the guy in the black shirt has the key, and the guy in the pink shirt doesn't. So what we're going to do is they're going to send, the guy in the black shirt is going to send his information, but the blue key is locked in the red padlock. Now the guy in this pink shirt, he's now put his own padlock, the green padlock, on the box. So you can see that those three people, the people who are the carrier service, the people who are sending and receiving these messages, or maybe that girl in the middle, she might just be listening in on the carrier service. They can't see the key, they can't get into it because the padlock has locked the box. Now, what happens is that the guy in the black shirt, he removes his red lock that he put on there initially. They send the key back again, and now the pink guy can unlock his padlock. So both people have unlocked the padlocks that they've put on, and the result is they've got a blue padlock, blue key. Both sides now have the blue key. So now they have the same key to share their information. Okay, so again, that all of these videos that I'm talking about now, if you only have audio, all of these videos are things that are in the document that I've sent to you, and I'll post that again in a second. Okay, so if we go to the next one is, so the next video is, this is a bit more complicated. So this guy explains that the way that we do this encryption is called the, I'm using Safari, that's why there's ads, because I don't have an ad blocker on Safari. Okay, this guy is explaining how the method that they use to do this using mathematics is called the Diffie-Hellman process. And this guy has two videos, a non-mathematical version, which uses ink, which is kind of sort of represented by the colors that we're going to use. And this guy actually goes through the maths of it. So to do this, you need to know two different bits of maths. Now, we always use the term Alice and Bob to represent the two people sending the message. Alice and Bob are the two sides of they're the ones who want to share the information. Now, what we need to start off with two numbers. We have to start with a number. Sorry, so just I'm just going to copy this. So Maddie, we can hear you, so it might be the headphones. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go, I'm going to go through. Okay, so if someone who's got theirs working, if they could just send Emily a private message, that would save me a lot of hassle. Okay, so if we go back to this video here, so there's two things he needs to know. You need to know the numbers G and N, and N has to be a really big prime number, right? So that's where the prime numbers aspect, and this is why prime numbers are such an important deal in maths. Now, there's two bits of maths you need to know. You need to know how to do a power of a number, and you need to find the modulus or the modulo of a number. So the way that okay, I'll talk about this a little bit still here. Okay, so to do a power, you know how if you have like 2 times 2 is the same as 2 squared, and that 2 to the power of 3 is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8, right? So, and 3 to the power of 3 is 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. So that's a power. You need to know the power, and then the next thing you need to know is the modulo. So the modulo is the remainder. So if you have, like, say the number 15, so 15 o'clock, right, is, if you divide that by 12, you get 1, remainder 3. So 15 o'clock is 3 o'clock, right, in the afternoon. So the idea there is that the modulo, so that's taking 15 modulo 12. And so our time that we use in our spoken language is modulo 12, because we're always dividing by 12 and taking the remainder. We can't ever have a number bigger than 12. If we get to 13 o'clock, it becomes 1 o'clock. So that's what our modulo is. And so they're just talking about mod. And generally, the symbol that you use in computers to type in modulos, we use the percentage sign as our symbol to show modulo. Sometimes you type out on Excel, for instance, you might type out the word mod. Okay, so then we've talked about key exchanges. We've talked about Diffie-Hellman. Okay, so encryption today. In modern encryption, the encryption keys we use are very large prime numbers. The coded message becomes incredibly long, and using today's computers would take decades to crack a single message. However, current encryption faces two problems: quantum computers and legal restrictions. So the problem with quantum computers is that they're this is where that first video, code.org, we're talking about how computers get better. They double in their power every year. Actually, they double every 18 months. So it means that the calculations that would be very difficult for modern computers could be solved by future computers in just minutes. So using an example of a famous court case, in 2016, the San Bernardino shooter, Apple did not, or could not possibly, unlock the iPhone of a criminal. This phone had 256-bit encryption, which is what we talked about in that code.org video. And in that, so that encryption is powerful, but the FBI was able to use really powerful supercomputers to unlock the phone. Now in 2012, more powerful, what we call 1024-bit encryption, could be broken by mathematicians with lots of time and powerful computers. And in 2013, companies such as Google switched to an even more powerful encryption called 2048-bit encryption. With current computing, this encryption would take millions of years to crack, but quantum computers could be much more powerful. So I won't go into quantum computers because that's like a whole nother realm of, that's a lesson on its own. But this video by Kurt Gazak, it's a little advanced for, your average Year 9 kid, but oh my God, ads. This is why I don't normally do things in Safari. And so quantum computing is, it's too complicated for me to go into here, but this video, which I've linked, does talk about quantum computing and why that might be a game changer. Okay, so moving on. Okay. Many governments, including Australia, have suggested banning encryption, while some, like Russia, already have. Okay, so this is a little bit old. I did update this, but Australia has banned encryption to some extent. They haven't banned encryption. They now have legal loopholes. A backdoor is when organisations such as police have a list of encryption keys. Many securities and civil rights groups have two problems with backdoors. Firstly, there's no way to ensure that encryption keys given to the police will never fall into the hands of someone who will use them illegally. And this is something we see with physical keys. So at the airport, there's these things called TSA locks. And the idea was that you could lock your padlock with TSA locks, and they could be opened by your key, or the TSA, the government officials, they also had a key. And that way they wouldn't have to cut open your bag to see what was inside. The problem is that very soon after them making these TSA keys, that they were being sold by people who just needed money. And it's probably very likely that if we gave people keys to our WhatsApps, that our WhatsApp encryption, that they would again fall into the hands of people who would use them for nefarious purposes. Okay, secondly, when governments have access to the citizens' private messages, they can use this data in ways that could hurt the democratic process. So if I click on this, we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to get a lot of ads. Okay, so this is a very simplified video that just sort of goes through what I've said there. Normally I would actually put this on in class, but not if I'm recording this, it's a problem. Okay, so any key that's available to the police can also be available to nefarious people. And then the argument is civil liberties people say, well, what's the difference between having private security compared to having safety of the public. So especially for like crimes against kids and that sort of stuff, that's where a lot of the arguments come from. Okay, so then there's this video by this guy called CGB Cray. I have shown you videos by this guy as well, and he talks about skippable ad. Okay, so in this video he goes through the difference of talking about. So with physical locks, no physical lock is ever going to stop a determined burglar. The idea is that burglars generally they can't tell which house to rob. So if a house looks like it's not going to be well protected, that just seems like the more obvious choice to go for. And the problem is the internet the distance doesn't matter. That people from far off countries where the laws don't really matter, where they're not worried about American laws, that they have an incentive just to try every single lock using robots or using software all the time. So the thing is that our physical locks, and I think I've skipped past this, our physical locks can be broken by, say, the police, right? So the example of there's a ticking time bomb, the code to the ticking time bomb is in this room. Well, the police can break down the door, right? They'll just use a physical they'll lockpick the door, they'll blow up the door if they have to. Whereas if it's on a phone, we don't really have that option, at least not at the moment with Apple encryption. So a lot of governments, including Australia, they've passed laws to say that the government is allowed to open people's phones. But the problem is that there's no way that and even if they follow every process perfectly, which I have personal doubts about, the problem is that it's very difficult for us to stop them from falling into the wrong hands. So even if your government is perfect and never ever going to have a problem, it doesn't mean that other people aren't going to have problems. So anyway, I think this is a very good video that explains that, and you can watch that later. Okay, so now we're going to go on to we're going to do the encryption process ourselves. Okay, so and then what I've got here, I just skipped over, is a bunch of videos that talk about a bunch of articles that talk about encryption as it applies to Australia. So in 2017, when they were proposing these laws, they talked about how the laws of mathematics don't apply in Australia, and what's the problem with just having a backdoor. And then so this is the law when it was passed in September of 2018, and then in 2019 they talked about how these laws have been applied, and then again in 2020 the problems with how they're being applied. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go through the process ourselves. So we're going to use what we need to be able to share information together, all we need is Alice and Bob need to come up with their own secret number. Now for us, we're going to use a secret number that's bigger than 10 and less than 30. It doesn't really matter if it's much bigger than 30, but I mean, it's just the bigger you make that number, the harder it is for the computer. So we're going to stick to a number between 10 and 30. Now each one of you guys is going to go through this process. So I want you to think of a number and maybe write down on a piece of paper what your private key is. Now you should never have to tell anyone your private key. Your private key stays secret always. Now there's two numbers that, I don't know if you remember Sesame Street, how they had like number of the day. So we're going to have two numbers of the day. We're going to use G and P. They're going to be our private, they're going to be like the number of the day. So if I go into this document, just one moment. Can you get my charger? If I go into the number of the day, so our numbers of the day are going to be 6 and 83. So the base number, which we're making yellow, that I just chose any number. It doesn't really matter. 6 is a good number. The bigger you, anyway, I'll use 6. And then our modulus that we're going to use is going to be 83. Now 83 has to be a big prime number. Usually it would be much bigger than the number 83. So for us, if we're setting at 83, that means a computer only has to make 83 attempts to be able to crack what the number is. Whereas we're going to use, real life computers would use much bigger numbers than 83, but we're going to use 83. Okay, so, and this is why, so I mentioned earlier that the process the computers can do it. So let's take if you look here, this is a 3-step process. So first step is we assign our numbers. Now, just for the first step, I'm going to make up a number, so it has to be between 10 and 30. So I'm going to choose my number. I'm going to be Bob, right? So I'm going to use the number B of 21. So what I need to do is G to the power of B mod P. So G for George, which is 6, to the power. Now the power key on your computer is the shift 6. It looks like a little arrow pointing to the air, or a circumflex if you do French. 6 to the power of, now we said I'm going to tell you my private key is going to be 14, right? And then I'm going to type mod. Now I can't just type mod. I have to use, this is how I do mod on Excel. And then the modulo is 83. And when I get that answer, my answer was 31. Now I can do that. The problem is that when I take a really big number, like when I take 31 to the power of 14, you can see how it comes up with num, and that is bad. We do not want num, because num means the number is too big and we can't deal with it. So this is where we're going to use a computer program to do this. So everyone should have been sent a Google Sheet, and in that you have got I was going to tell people what they were in advance. I'm going to just type up all of the names now, and I'm going to tell you which one you are. So you're going to be randomly assigned as Alice or Bob, and what we're going to go is we're going to go through this. So let's say I'm Bob 1, right? I'm going to be Bob 1. So what I'll do is I'll go in and I will know that my number is 14, right? So I'm going to go to tinyworlds.power so power mod calc, right? So I just created that shortener, and when I go to that page, I can then see base, exponent, and modulus. So we said the base was 6, the modulus was 14, so the exponent, that's my secret key, don't tell anyone, shh, and then 83 is my modulus, and I get the number 31. Now I'm going to share that with someone else, and they're going to replace the number 6 with my modulus, and they're going to have their own exponent. Let's say their exponent was 29. And they're going to then calculate this number 70. When I calculate their number, it's also going to be 70. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense unless we do it in practice. So what I might do is I might get someone who has done this before. So maybe like Alina or Ella or Grace. Okay. Okay, so here's what I'll do. I will do both sides. Okay, so I am going to, so let's say I've got Alice, so I'm Bob 1, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the steps one by one. So we said our base is 6, and my exponent was 14. When I calculate that, I get the number 31. Now I'm going to tell everyone, my public key is 31, right? Sorry, my public key, I'm B, so I'm putting 31 in there. Now, at the same time I'm doing that, I'm going to be Alice, right? So if I go to A1, I'm going to be Alice. I guess I could talk with a higher voice to represent that I'm Alice. Okay, so when I go to A1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a different number. So I still use 6 and I still use 83, but I use my own, let's say my exponent is going to be 27, right? And they get, so she says, Alice says, my private key is, my public key rather, that's really important. My public key is 8. So public key A1 is 8. Whoops. Is 8. Okay. Now, what Bob does, okay, I'm Bob. Bob says, okay, I'm going to take Alice's public key and see how Alice's public key was 8. I'm going to replace the number of the day with Alice's public key 8, and now I get the number 42. That's a really good number. I couldn't have chosen that better because there's a book where 42 is an important number, and Bob is going to enter in the number 42 because Bob thinks that that's the shared key. And then I go to Alice, and Alice is like, I'm going to enter in Bob's secret key. So what was her exponent? I think I've done this totally wrong because so this is what happens when you beat 2 people at the same time.
It was 14.
Is hers 14? You sure?
Yeah.
Wasn't his 14?
Then hers was 27 then.
Yeah, hers was 27. So, okay, let me do that right then. So, Bob's was 14, so his was 81. Oh, that's less good. Okay, so Bob got 81. And then Alice is going to replace... So, Alice's would have looked like this. 27, that's what she had. And then she's going to enter in Bob's number of 31. And they both get 81. No, wait, let me show you that reveal. It's more exciting than that. So when Alice says, okay, I have a shared key of 81, but she's not saying that because she's keeping that secret. I have a shared key of 81. And when she hits enter, shared keys match. Pretty exciting, right? So if the shared keys, if you and your partner both have the same shared key, then you will get a match in the shared key. So this guide here explains what to do using colors. So the idea is, I'll go through it just quickly using colors, and then I'll let you guys do it. So we're going to start with the public number yellow, right? So when we add yellow and we add in private color red, yellow and red together make orange, right? And then if you have yellow and blue together, they make green. So what happens then is if instead of, so this is typing that in the calculator, yellow plus red, and the gray modulus gives the color orange. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take green, and then you're going to add in the so Alice is going to take Bob's public key and add in her secret red. Green and red make brown. Well, Bob is going to take Alice's public key, add in his secret color blue, and then combine those together, and you get brown. And you can see they both get the same shade of brown. They both have the same shared key. Okay, so this is orange and blue, and this is red and green, and both those colors make brown. Okay, sorry, I'm showing this to my daughter at the same time, and she disputed which colors, about color mixing. Anyway, it's not really important. The colors are just there to represent a concept. Okay, so what we're going to try and do now is I'm going to assign to different people that Emily, I will clear out my values out of that chart so that way you guys can, so A1 and B1 need to be emptied. Okay, so Emily, can you hear me? You are A1. Okay, who's dry soup? Whoever dry soup is, you are B1. Alina and Ella, oh, okay, fine. Is it two Ellas? Okay, Elena is A1, sorry, A2, Juliana is B2. Okay, Ella is, okay, I don't know how to differentiate between the different Ellas. Okay, so what I'll say is Ella Coleman is going, because I taught her more. You're going to be A3, and there we go. Ella, I don't know the last name of the other Ella, so I'm sorry about that. You're going to be B3. So the two Ellas are going to work together. Grace and Lauren. So Grace is going to be A4, and Lauren will be B4. Okay. So then we're up to Maddie. Who's Pangolin? Who's me? What's your name? Jade. Okay. So Maddie, you're going to be A5, and Jade is going to be B5. So you guys can see. For those of you who can't see, I'll now work with you guys to like help point out where things are. Oh, and that's good. That's everyone, and everyone's paired up. Okay. So what you need to do is go to the sheet that I should have shared for everyone. That should be accessible to everyone here, but I'm going to copy that again, and you're just going to enter in those tabs and follow in the steps, and I will help. If you've got a problem, you can just let me know now, and I will help you out as best I can. Emily. Did Emily get in the end? No, and we lost Emily. Okay, and we lost Charlotte. what I will say is, if they ever see this at some point, and Emily A6 and Charlotte B6. Okay, so this is actually where I'll pause this, stop recording, and I'll upload